we are honored to have on the panel 4 distinguished speakers. On my right, Mr. François Münger, Director of the Geneva Water Hub. Next to him, Dr. Danilo Türk, Chair of the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace. And next to him, Mr. Johan Gély, Head of the Global Water Program at the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. And on the far right, Mr. Duncan, Director of OOSKAnews. Mrs. Adjaratou Khouredia Ndiaye could not have a confirmation for today, so she won't be there. And we have also Mr. Dagim, Gesese, Terefe, Freelance journalist and Global Goodwill Ambassador of Ethiopia, who will deliver his message with a short video. Before giving the floor to Mr. Münger, I would like to ask our guests to sign our gold book, as it is the tradition here at the Press Club, and to receive a little present, the book Cartooning for Peace. So, Mr. Münger, the floor is yours. Just press on the button.
Thank you. Thank you, Tobias. Dear participant in front of your screen, welcome to be with us. We have been received by the Symphony on Water and Peace. This symphony has been composed in parallel of the development of the high-level panel on water and peace, and Dr. Danilo Türk will present you more after. As certainly you know, sustainable fresh water management is certainly one of the major challenges of this century. Freshwater resources are vital and fundamental for agriculture, for industry, for all the development. Just for one of your car, you need 400,000 liters of water to build this car. These resources are under high pressure. Population growth, over-exploitation, but it's not just a question also of quantity, pollution, inefficiency, and climate change. Water is a center of the climate issues, is not responsible of the problematic of the climate, but is certainly the resource affected by climate change. For example, we have now in the world 7,000 big or large dams, and currently we have 3,700 large hydroelectric dams in planning or in construction. This means half of the existing dams, we are now in the reconstruction of these dams. All these factors provoke a lot of tension and conflict. These tensions are in the transboundary level between countries, with the role of geopolitics, etc., but also at the local level. You certainly know the tension or conflict that we have in various parts of the world between, for example, mining extraction and local uses of water for agriculture, for drinking water, etc. And water is not often the unique factor of a conflict, but water has the capacity to catalyze various factors of conflict. And of course, in the present armed conflict that we have, water is used as a weapon. This is the case, it is the case in Syria, Yemen, Sudan. In all the conflict, water is a target or a weapon. On the other hand, we have a lot of treaties that force the cooperation on water. We have also excellent examples. For example, the management of the Senegal River Basin So water is in the same time source of conflict and tension, and also source of cooperation. And all the water management is in this vibration between these two poles. But it is with this positive vision that the Geneva Water Hub has been created, this vision that water could be a source of peace, and we are part of the Blue Peace movement, and my colleague Johan will say a little more on this Blue Peace movement after that. The Geneva Water Hub is the global center of the University of Geneva. We have three main functions. The first one is research education. The second one is advocacy, using the International Geneva, where we have the peace agenda and we have the development agenda, and water is the bridge between these two agendas. And we have also a function of think tank or safe space. We try to create an enabling environment, discrete environment, to treat hot topic related with water conflict, but also to be creative in terms of innovation, and in particular financing innovation. As an example, we had such safe space on the Sahel. As you know, on the Sahel, we have conflict now. We have 3 or 4 groups of terrorists in the Sahel. The global answer is the G5 Sahel, more arms for the local armies is probably necessary, but it's certainly not enough. So we have created a round table with military, but also with representation of the local population to tackle this subject. What has to be done in terms of development? What is the role of water, for example, in the Sahel? And it's also with this positive vision that water is a source of peace that has been created, the high-level panel of water and peace. 15 co-governing countries have launching and supporting this panel. The panel has produced in less than 2 years his recommendation under the presidency of Danilo Türk, 7 chapters of recommendation, and one of the recommendations is also to create a global observatory on water and peace. And we are now also in the building of this global observatory on water and peace with different institutions. It's not a new instrument. It's a new instrument, but a new institution with different existing institutions which has the capacity to analyze in the region this problematic water, peace, and security, and also the capacity to create safe space at their level on regional topic. So we are in this building of this global observatory. But if we are here today, it's also for the launch and the presentation of this new platform, the Water Diplomat. And for this platform, we have a symbol, is this pencil. And this pencil is more than a pencil. This pencil is also a bridge between countries, a bridge between sectors, a bridge between the agenda of peace and the agenda of the development agenda. And this pencil is more than a bridge. You have here, I hope you have this pencil, you have here a seed, and you can plant this pencil, and you will obtain a wonderful flower, forget-me-not. And this means that with the Water Diplomat, that will be largely presented by David, you can have a fruitful, you can push your idea and have a return and present your idea. So a bridge and a seed. With this, I just like to pass to my colleague. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Danilo Türk. I was president of Slovenia before, and before that I worked in the United Nations as Assistant Secretary General to Kofi Annan, dealing with political affairs. And I guess that these two pieces of information explain why I was asked to chair the Global High-Level Panel on Water and Peace back in 2015, when a group of 15 member states of the United Nations decided to put together that panel to analyze the global situation of water and to make recommendations. Now, François has already explained the basic rationale, the philosophy of our work, and when you are interested to look into some of the details, you can take the reports which are on the desk in front of this room. So I don't want to go into any sort of summarizing of the report. I would just like to explain that after having done the analysis, we clearly came to the conclusion that water is a matter of survival. This is one of the dramatic questions of the 21st century, and that title of the report, A Matter of Survival, was chosen because of that. We also understood, as we all should, that water is a shared resource. And although countries normally deal with water management at the national level or at the local level, water issues today are increasingly international and to some extent global, because most of the effects of climate change are felt through water phenomena, through floods, through droughts, through desertification and other dramatic phenomena of our era. So I don't want to spend too much time on diagnostics. I just want to bring you a bit of a flavor of what we try to explain in our report. Then, of course, the question was, we have done the report in 2 years, between 2015 and 2017. And as a UN official with some experience, I know that once you make a product, a report or a resolution, the most important thing is follow-up. Now, follow-up is more important than the report itself, because the report brings together a diagnosis, and that's not too difficult to do given the knowledge that exists. And by the way, there are 32 units in the United Nations systems which are dealing with various aspects of water. So there is plenty of work done within the United Nations. The question is whether it is well organized, well established in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. But there is a lot of knowledge, and it's not too difficult to make a comprehensive diagnosis. What is more difficult is to figure out what kind of new types of cooperation are needed in the 21st century. Of course, we could not be too prescriptive in our report. We did not have the authority, neither did we have an illusion that we can prescribe dramatically new forms of cooperation. But we wanted to identify the ways forward. And François has spoken about that also, because there are certain areas in which future cooperation has to expand and expand very quickly. And I would like to mention only 4 by way of example. See, our panel dealt with problem of water in armed conflicts and in peace as an instrument of strengthening of peace. In armed conflicts, we see that water is increasingly used as a weapon of war or as object of attack. In both cases, this is violation of international humanitarian law. So in the follow-up to our report, the Geneva Water Hub produced a set of principles called Geneva List of Principles for Protection of Water Infrastructure in Armed Conflicts. Now, this is a document which I think is also available on the desk outside. This is a new document which just came out, which systematically brings together all elements of humanitarian law, water law, and other legal aspects, and some of the policy directions which are emerging in the Security Council of the United Nations. I myself have been to Security Council twice at the time when the panel was working, and we tried to mobilize the council members to give more attention to water in armed conflicts, which is very necessary because armed conflicts take place increasingly in urban areas. Attacks on water infrastructure have reverberating effects which reach much wider than the immediate impact of attack and for a much longer period, and they affect larger civilian population than immediately thought. So these principles called Geneva List is a new instrument which is before you. I would advise you to take a look. In December this year, the Red Cross Conference will have an item on this as well, the conference of ICRC, the Red Cross societies, and state parties of the Geneva Conventions. The other example, which is different but still related to armed conflicts, is what François mentioned before, organizing discrete, sensitive consultations on how to handle water issues in specific conflicts. He spoke about Sahel. Now, Sahel became a huge problem after the collapse and destruction of Libya, and obviously the conflict there is likely to last. It cannot be resolved exclusively by military means, and one has to introduce the element of water economy in every meaningful search for peace. And once peace is re-established, then of course water management will be a critically important element of maintaining peace. So this is why we, through Geneva Water Hub, try to organize consultations involving various actors to help this to happen. On the side of using water as an instrument of peace, I'd like to mention two examples. One is investment in water infrastructure, including in particular transboundary water infrastructure. I don't have to explain why this is important, but I would like to say one thing. At this very moment, we look into the discussion on global finance, and what we see. We see an increasing emphasis on the need to strengthen investment in infrastructure in order to promote development. That's a very interesting tendency in discussions of finance. I'm not talking about water this time. I'm talking about the future development and financial situation of the world. Wherever you go, IMF, United Nations, financial meetings, the need to expand investment in infrastructure is the order of the day. And I would like to draw your attention to that. And of course, our community, water community, would like that to be also felt when it comes to water infrastructure, in particular transboundary water infrastructure. Now, of course, we know that investing in infrastructure doesn't bring huge profits, that there is always a question of profit level, yields, returns, and this the economy. And obviously the question of safety of investment. Safe space, meaning providing space which allows a type of design and management of transboundary water projects which would be safe and which would, of course, be economically viable. So it's a big challenge nowadays, but becoming increasingly central. Now, obviously, one can say, well, financial people will know how to deal with this. I'm not sure. And they have to think about a big competition coming from China, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is very much directed towards investing in infrastructure and not being completely, dependent on short-term economic and financial calculation. So I think the world of investment has to start thinking in a much more long term. And that's an important lesson to be explored further. In order to come to that point, we need to strengthen what we call water diplomacy. There has to be much more sophisticated diplomatic communication leading to creation of safe spaces and allowing for an expansion of investment in water infrastructure. This is also growing. In November this year, the European Union, the new bodies of the European Union will have a big conference in Brussels on water diplomacy, which is a sign, which is one symptom of this growing awareness of which I am talking. And of course, the European Union is a very major actor in global investment. Switzerland, as we will hear from Johan, Gély, is already very active in that regard, is the case vanguard in that sense. And we can look towards the next few years as a time when the debate and possibly action on investment in water infrastructure will be growing. Now, these are the kind of things which I wanted to bring to you as examples of what do we expect to be subject of debate and of interest to the public. Now, how to do it is another question, but here are specialists who will tell us more about this, about Water Diplomat, about Blue Peace Index. So there are new techniques being developed to make water issues more discussed and better understood. I mean, water issues are often treated as if this was something for water engineers or for hydrogeologists, technical experts, and that ordinary people and politicians, first of all, don't know much about it, don't have to know much about it, and don't care about it. Now, this era is over. Now we have all to learn a little bit about these things, and new platforms, new instruments of public discussion on this are really necessary, and this is why we are here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Türk. So, Mr. Gély, you can maybe give us some more information about the Blue Peace movement and what you're doing at the water program.
Many thanks. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm here to represent the Swiss Confederation, specifically the Swiss Development and Cooperation Agency, and more specifically the Water Division, the Global Program Water within the Swiss Development and Cooperation Agencies. For us, and for already many years, the 21st century will be the century of water and peace. And that's why we are here today. And this is very, very important. And there is a postulate behind that, is that among other things, speaking about facts, there is today 250 million people who are suffering from waterborne disease. Nobody sees them. Among these 250 million people, almost 3 million are dying every day because of waterborne disease. Nobody sees them because they are not dying in 1 second. They are dying over time. And the attribution link between water, bad quality of water, and their deaths is not always explicit. And we are there, among other things, to render this fact more explicit. 3 million people are dying every year because of waterborne disease, because of bad quality waters. Nobody sees them. Another aspect is that we are speaking about transboundary water agreement. If you look at the a little bit more than 260 transboundary watershed in the world, we have only among them 40% of them which have some sort of transboundary agreement. And most of these already existing transboundary agreements are not enough sustainable because they are not enough systemic, exhaustive, and comprehensive. One of the tasks that we have within the Blue Peace movement, of course, is to address and to enhance and improve these types of agreement, transboundary water agreements, for the 40% existing ones, and to try to help countries to design new ones for the 60% which do not have transboundary water agreement. If you look at the story of water, there is some interesting development that are a postulate for us to start a conversation regarding water and transboundary water. In 1984, if you are we were in El Salvador with some colleagues of us. 1984, Contras Sandinistas were fighting in El Salvador. They were fighting during days and days, months and months, and years. But when the front line was coming in the middle of an irrigation field or perimeters, overnight, the local representative of Sandinists and the local representative of Contras were discussing each other regarding the day after allocation of water within the irrigation field. The metaphor behind that, or the postulate behind that, is we can fight and kill each other with Kalashnikov, but when it comes to the distribution of water in an irrigation field, then we have to discuss. That was in 1984. And we have observed this situation in many other places in the world. Another one was 2016, close to Alep, when the rebels, when the pro-government and anti-government people were fighting at each other. We have observed exactly the same situation when the front line were coming to irrigation fields. So the postulate of the Blue Peace movement is to say that people can fight at each other's, but the best tool to enhance stability and peace is water. And in this situation, in Alep, for instance, but also in El Salvador, but also in Afghanistan, the discussion around water overnight sometimes has led to some kind of peaceful situation in a very localized areas. And sometimes this peaceful situation in very localized areas have expanded to other areas and was a pretext of the beginning of a conversation, a peaceful conversation, starting on water and then expanding to other sectors. So this is a very important postulate for us. With the Blue Peace movement, what do we want to create? We want to create a political, a diplomatic, a development space for progressive people, and there is a lot all over the world, which are ready to discuss among them on people who believe in a kind of open and sustainable society. And for that, I will provide 3 specific examples. Among these people, we have, of course, a young generation. We want to further design and further expand this Blue Peace movement, but we have a problem. When it comes to water and sanitation, the young people have difficulties sometimes to be attracted to this sector because this sector is not sexy enough. This is not sexy enough because it does not pay a lot, because if you are a specialist of water and sanitation, you, most of the time, especially at the beginning of your career, you have to work in very remote rural areas, and there is many other aspects. So to attract the young generation and the most disruptive of them in the water sector, we have to design new kind of product, new kind of tools to make sure that they can be with us in this movement. And we have currently dozens of thousands of young people, we call them water youth parliamentarians, all over the world, which are working within the principle of the Blue Peace movement. For instance, in Niger, we have 150 Nigerian water youth parliamentarians promoting the issue of Blue Peace. Another aspect is the private sector, and President Danilo Türk have just mentioned a very fundamental aspect regarding the private sector. We have a paradigm problem when it comes to the water sector. If we want to achieve the SDG 6, we do not have enough human resources, enough financial resources. For that, we need the private sector, and when we speak about the private sector, we speak also about the pension fund and investments fund to invest in the water sector. And for that, we are lucky for the moment. When we speak about the first leg of this pension fund, when we speak about the first leg of this investments fund, the first leg being this fund ready to invest in the sustainable agenda, we are lucky, and there is a moment to seize, is that this first leg pension and investment fund, they are under pressure of their client. Their client wants them to invest in the sustainable agenda. So there is a moment to seize. And as correctly said by President Danilo Türk, the art of the game now, or the challenge that we have in front of us within the Blue Peace movement, and we have a Blue Peace financing arms of the Blue Peace movement, is really to design new kind of product, new kind of tools to make sure that the financial, the new kind of financier, again, investment fund, pension fund, will feel secure to invest in the water sector. This is not easy, but we've been working with a lot of experts on that for many years, and there is a solution, and we are currently trying to design this kind of solution. We'll be ready to speak about that, and you can contact us anytime. A third aspect is the journalist, of course, and now I'm speaking specifically to the journalist. The water crisis requires the mobilization of all pillars of the society. And the journalist, you, the journalists, I don't know if there is journalist in the room, but or maybe in the screen, they're behind the screen. The journalist, you have to play a key role, because what you need, of course, is data, evidence. And for that, the Blue Peace movement is there to provide you with this kind of data and evidence, to make sure that you can make evidence-based information or analysis that are or has to be meaningful for the society. You, the journalists, you are there also to help us to make sure that the political leadership all over the world can understand better the challenge of the water sector. Again, the evidence and the data are among these Blue Peace Movement experts on people. What is important for us is to make sure that we can attract journalists which are not experts of the sustainable agenda. We want to attract journalists which are very well known in their respective countries and which can speak about the water sector in a meaningful ways with a high level of ownership. And this is a challenge that we have currently. It is a pity because, again, within the water sectors, I've been speaking about some stories. President Danilo Türk was speaking about stories, as well as François and David will as well. There is fascinating stories to tell in the water sector, and we are calling upon you to approach us because we can provide you evidence, data on good stories. Again, don't be afraid, and this is a call to the journalists, don't be afraid, the water sector is extremely sexy. There is huge, unbelievable, good stories that will make, we can tell you that you can sell to the people, and this is very important. And I would like to conclude. I had many other things to say, and that's why I'm a little bit now disturbed, but I will stop now. And I would like to conclude again to say that the 21st century will be all about water and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gély, and thank you for the transition, because we will now speak about the role of media in the hydropolitical issues, and we'll have the presentation of the Water Diplomat platform by Mr. David Duncan. But before, we have a message from Mr. Dagim Terefe Gesese. He just won a prize at the World Water Week for his engagement in journalism, and he delivered a short message which we'll show right now. Political issues, and we'll have the presentation of the Water Diplomat platform by Mr. David Duncan. But before, we have a message from Mr. Dagim Terefe Gesese. He just won a prize at the World Water Week for his engagement in journalism, and he delivered a short message which we'll show right now.
Water scarcity,
political issues, and we'll have the presentation of the Water Diplomat platform by Mr. David Duncan. But before, we have a message from Mr. Dagim Terefe Gesese. He just won a prize at the World Water Week for his engagement in journalism, and he delivered a short message which we'll show right now.
Africa. Political
issues, and we'll have the presentation of the Water Diplomat platform by Mr. David Duncan. But before, we have a message from Mr. Dagim Terefe Gesese. He just won a prize at the World Water Week for his engagement in journalism, and he delivered a short message which we'll show political issues, and we'll have the presentation of the Water Diplomat platform by Mr. David Duncan. But before, we have a message from Mr. Dagim Gesese. Just won a prize at the World political issues, and we'll have the presentation of the Water Diplomat platform by Mr. David Duncan. But before, we have a message from Mr. Dagim Gesese. Just won a prize at the political issues, and we'll have the presentation of the Water Diplomat platform by Mr. David To Mr. David Duncan, director of OOSKAnews, and please give us an overview of this new platform and how you came to this point and what you will provide on this platform. Thank you. Just press yes.
Thank you, Tobias. And it's an honor to come after Dagim. I had the privilege of meeting him at World Water Week in Stockholm earlier this year. He's a very impressive young journalist, a water journalist. I'm the founder of OOSKAnews, which is a specialist publisher of news and intelligence related to water, all parts of water, where water challenges touch the environment, humanitarian issues, ecosystems, the nexus with food security and energy security. It's a big subject, water and climate change, and not least water and peace, water and human conflict. Our mission at OOSKAnews is twofold: to deliver timely, reliable, water-related news to water communities, to the water insiders, which is a big family, a diverse family, those who already understand the importance of water challenges, but also secondly, and more importantly to today's proceedings, to bring information, to educate, to preach, if you like, about the importance of the vital, if slightly complex, subject of water. And it's in furtherance of that second mission of OOSKAnews that we have entered into a collaboration with the Geneva Water Hub to produce a new media platform, which is starting off with a free monthly email newsletter. The platform and the newsletter are called the Water Diplomat. There are echoes here of other aims to reach mainstream media. Johan briefly made reference to this Blue Peace Index, which is being developed with the Economist intelligence unit. The Water Diplomat is geared to reach out and provide a tool to journalists, but also to be an accessible route to non-journalists, non-experts, if you like, in the world of water. We launched this new platform at World Water Week. It's a big gathering that happens in Stockholm. I think it's been going about 25 years. It attracts some great and good every year, and I think possibly I met Johan for the first time at a World Water Week. And I go along as a journalist, and I go along for networking. It's where you meet everybody in the world of water. Set up base in the press room, as you do, and as the journalists here will know the scenario. And I've noticed a growing interest in mainstream media, not just environmental journalists, but some increasing numbers of mainstream media in coming along and reporting what perhaps 10 or 15 years ago was a slightly esoteric subject, world water challenges. The newsroom gets busier every year, but briefly, anecdotally, I got a little bit too excited this year because I walked in at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning with my camera case and my microphone, and the press room was mobbed. I mean, you couldn't move, and I thought, oh my goodness, we've got the breakthrough. Mainstream media is finally paying attention to water, but no. The Princess of Sweden was visiting the conference centre that day to award a prize, so it was a bit of a false dawn. But I think the big picture is that matters are improving. An example of matters improving was that last week I was fortunate enough to attend, as a specialist water journalist, a gathering of non-specialists organised by an entity called the Strategic Foresight Group. It was a gathering in Kathmandu, Nepal, to bring together a more specialist water community with non-specialist journalists. And there were senior individuals from the BBC and NBC, people whose names I had heard, and Political Magazine, The Economist, and I detected that there was genuine interest in this message that I suppose the water insiders, and I count myself as one of those even though I'm a journalist, were trying to communicate that water is not an esoteric subject. It touches everything, every aspect of human activity. And I think we're winning that battle in terms of global mainstream media awareness. There's a comparison that I like to make, which is with the subject area, and thinking about this as a journalist. The subject area of climate change as a global issue has, of course, benefited from a big rise in public awareness over the last 20 years, 25 years, 30 years ago. People might think, okay, there's that ozone layer thing, but climate change was not something you talked about at the golf course or in the pub or with one's children. Now, climate change has benefited from a number of fortunate phenomena like Al Gore, like David Attenborough, like Greta Thunberg, and now is a subject of mainstream political and social discourse. The Water Diplomat isn't going to be water's Greta Thunberg moment overnight, but perhaps we can do a little bit to change matters and to improve public understanding. and this is another link with climate change, because policymakers have understandably been focused on mitigation of climate change, as this story has impacts, and that correctly is what journalists report on, carbon emissions and reduction thereof, and rising sea levels. But let me, as a journalist and with due humility, share with you my view that where many politicians have yet to catch up with the real story, and public awareness lags behind, and journalistic coverage is only more recently catching up, is that climate change is already here. You can only mitigate so much. It's a little bit too late for to mitigate those changes. They're with us. We see increasingly severe weather events already, droughts and floods, forcing human migration, feeding into societal disruptions, sometimes leading to human conflict already. So, as a journalist, I posit that the next big story, or the big story that where there's a journalistic opportunity, isn't so much climate change mitigation and carbon emissions, but climate change adaptation to alterations in our planet that are with us already and will become more evident. And adaptation of our world to climate change realities means understanding water. It is where climate change impacts. It's where the rubber meets the road, because it's the water changes that are deleterious to our environment, to humanitarian concerns, to human health, to ecosystems, food production, energy security, and potential for human conflict. The way that the Water Diplomat works is that it is a monthly email newsletter. The pencils that François Münger described are available with the seed and the bridge. Pick them up if you didn't pick one up on your way into this press conference. They're available at the desk. When you leave, the format that we have taken in terms of categorizing our news for the Water Diplomat is picked up from the report of the Global High-Level Panel on Water Peace, chaired by President Türk. We categorize water news into, briefly, water and armed conflicts, international water law and transboundary water cooperation, knowledge-based and data-driven decision-making and cooperation, intersectoral water management and decision-making, financial innovation, and new mechanisms of water diplomacy. There's one of those cool QR codes on your pencil. You take a photograph of that, you sign up for a subscription, you get this monthly intelligence bulletin, the Water Diplomat, and give us some feedback. Please use it as a source for your own journalism. There are relatively few journalists around the world. Dagim is an honourable exception, who describe themselves as water journalists, or who describe water journalism as one of their core strengths. I posit that in the next 5 years, 10 years, there are going to be a lot of journalists for reasons that this panel has discussed today. And I appeal to journalists. Appeals may be the wrong word. I point out an opportunity, a professional opportunity to journalists, that climate adaptation and how water is the key issue of the 21st century is a breaking story that is not yet being reported as well as it could be. And it is a vitally important news story. So look out for the Water Diplomat. Sign up for it, please. And if you agree that this can be a helpful source and roadmap for your reporting, then please use it. I welcome any questions, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, David. So I'd like to open the floor now for your questions. So please try to be brief, introduce yourself shortly, and the floor is yours. no question. Please, yes.
Thank you very much. Myself, Sohrab Wali from the Embassy and Permanent Mission of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. First, I would like to thank you for the nice conference, which was very informative and useful in case of water. A bundle of knowledge for waters. As you know, Afghanistan is located in a place where neighboring countries, most probably according to a report of international organization, will be in the next 10 to 20 years will be in starvation of water. So it is a matter of national issue for Afghanistan. How can we switch on this issue of conflict into a matter of collaboration, cooperation? It's also a conflict matter. So I want to ask Mr. Türk, what are the rights of upstream and downstream? For example, if the upstream country builds dams on some installation or structure, isn't it the violation of the rights of downstream or the people of downstream? And also one another question from Mr. François. You said in your statements that the water hub is one of the functions of the water hub is providing research education. I want to please give some clarifications, explanations. Is it a kind of training programs like providing for countries, other as such other things? Thank you very much for for the nice information conference. Thank you.
On the first question, the rules of international water law, the basic principles, are all around the concepts of fair and reasonable use of water resources. This is one principle, fair and reasonable use, and the other principle is do no significant harm. So this is as far as substantive legal norms are concerned. These are the principles upon which the whole system of international law on water cooperation is organized. Now, obviously, when it comes to relations between upstream and downstream countries, this always is a very sensitive matter. And it is never easy to figure out what is fair and reasonable use and how much harm is still not significant harm. So, these are the kind of things which are not easy to work out. There are no courts to decide on this sort of things. This has to be managed diplomatically. And obviously, in many situations, neighboring countries are not in a good position to negotiate directly. If they are, all to the best. And very often they are. I mean, there is a lot of historic evidence showing that these principles were given specific meaning and specific technical expression in water cooperation among upper riparian and lower riparian countries. Significantly, very often these agreements are made after big wars, because when war is over, then the earlier warring parties take water as a factor of stabilizing peace. So post-water moments are very good for making such agreements. And we have seen this in Europe from Peace of Westphalia back in 1648 all the way to Balkan Wars in 1990s. The same pattern. When the war is over, water cooperation becomes really quite important as a stabilizer for peace. Now, I hope that Afghanistan will soon see, a peace agreement. I know about the whole history. I've been in Security Council dealing with the issue. I know how difficult it is, but I'm sure that, conditions will be made will emerge which will allow improvement. But one does not have to wait. And here is where I would like to refer to my friend Johan Gély, because Blue Peace Movement is also about these things. I mean, Blue Peace Movement can help in developing communications and Switzerland, obviously, as a neutral country, as a country which has a long tradition of helping discussions, helping communication among countries in difficult, mutual relations. That can be one channel. And the other thing is Geneva Water Hub. We have spoken, François has spoken about safe space. There is always possible, everybody comes to Geneva. All actors come to Geneva. Geneva is really a very special place in the world. Almost everybody can get a visa to come to Geneva for an international meeting. And I have been involved in many situations in the past, humanitarian, indigenous people and others, who used various conferences in Geneva to sit down in a hotel or sit down somewhere in a quiet place and discuss issues which were politically impossible to discuss anywhere else. So while principles are here, institutions are not providing automatic solutions. There are channels through which solutions can be sought, and I'm sure that Afghanistan can work with neighbors through various, contact points in Geneva very well. So I'd like to add my voice to propagating international Geneva as an excellent place to do these things.
Yeah, many thanks, and many thanks for your response, President Türk. Yeah, of course, we are always available. I would add some complementary remarks to that. First, in addition to what President Türk had just said, first, political leadership is very important. The water agenda has to be very high in the political agenda of the riparian countries altogether, which are sharing watershed management, and this is very important. But this political leadership needs to see water through systemic lens. What I mean by that? We, in general, too much focus on water, energy, on agriculture, or food, the food system. This is a very important nexus that we have to address altogether. But this is not enough. The solution of the water, especially in a transboundary context, can be seen in other sectors, by bringing other sectors in the story. So systemic way means water, agriculture, energy, but also maybe trade. Through political, diplomatic discussion on trade issues, we can have some solution for the water sector. Beyond trade, any other issues. And this is very important. So all sectors of the society which are important for a country are to be concerned by the water. And most of the time, we can find water solution in a transboundary context outside the water sector. Third element, which is very important, on this we have been doing that with Afghanistan already, there is some good example worldwide. Or we can provide, the Geneva Water Hub can provide some study tour, and there is many good example of countries living exactly the same situations as Afghanistan in terms of scarcity, but countries which has been finding solution among themselves. So study tour is the third example. Then, of course, the fourth example raised by President Danilo Türk, the role of a third party. The need to design safe space, very important. When it comes to neutral issues, or somehow neutral issues, technical assistance, training, etc., that is, of course, the role of the Geneva Water Hub, and this is very important. Now, when it comes to political and diplomatic negotiation among riparian countries, there, the role of third party has to be defined in a very proper manner. Switzerland cannot interfere among political and diplomatic negotiation among different riparian countries if all the riparian countries are not asking for this diplomatic and political intervention for Switzerland. This is very important. Some countries have made mistakes in the past, thinking that they could play a role of a third party, but not having the green light from all riparian countries together. So there is different level and there is different solution. And of course, the Geneva Water Hub is at the center. It can be a centerpiece of this kind of discussion.
Thank you. On the research and education, we have a network of research. Of course, the University of Geneva is part of this network, but a large network of universities working with this on this question of hydro diplomacy and hydropolitics. And in terms of training, we have a massive training online, the MOOC, on hydro diplomacy, on hydropolitics, and also in international water law. And we have certificate of advanced studies or summer school every year. And we try in each of our summer school to have at least one journalist in this training or courses. We have also other type of training. For example, we were in Iran for training with not political person, but a technical person and student. We will be in Russia, in the Duma, for not a training, an exchange with parliamentaries. And we have this capacity also to have exchange, training with parliamentaries, with, for example, also the diplomat of the Francophonie in New York, because it's a subject that becomes now more important also in the UN nation in New York. So we have this disponibility to organize a training. But we just require that the person are in the action. Now we know that our training, our students are normally not for just to have a certificate, but really because they are in action and often they become part of a network.
Thank you very much. If there is no longer question, I would... Une intervention? Ok, Monsieur Gély, oui.
Since there is no intervention, I have a last play again to the journalist, and this is very important. As David said, there is a huge opportunity in the water sector, and some of the mainstream media have understood it. The Economist has just published a Blue Peace Index. This is very important. And the Economist is mainstream media. The Financial Times is organizing on a regular basis water security conference in London. They have understood it. London Stock Exchange is organizing water event on a regular basis, so with journalists. So if this kind of mainstream journalists have understood it, I'm calling upon the other journalists. There is a huge professional opportunities, as said by David, to work in the water sector. And if you want to be in the first league, you have to start now. You only have to be part of this story now, or not tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank our distinguished panelists for sharing all this information about water diplomacy. I would like to thank also Jean Villemain for all the organization and for the subtitles on Mr. Gesese video. And to thank all of you for coming this morning, and we can continue at the back of the room discussing. Thank you very much.